The podcast came about because I was watching Lost, and I think it was maybe season 3 or 4, and the finale happened, and I wanted to talk about it with people, and nobody had seen it. Nobody that I was, that I was working with or, was friends with was still watching, and I was bummed because I just still wanted to talk about it. And I remember reading a couple of articles. It was the summer between season 1 and season 2 of Breaking Bad. I remember reading a couple of articles that, reviews or something were talking about it. And they talked about podcasts. And I'm like, what? I've heard the term, but what is a podcast, And then I started kind of trying to find, I didn't even know how to find them, You had to, there were, things you had to, be in deep, logic on the internet to try and find these things, right? And so I, found them and sort of listened to them like, oh, this is just talk radio. Well, I listen to talk radio all the time. What cool way to listen to talk radio about stuff that I, like and I can actually, choose. So I started listening to a couple of Lost podcasts. And I realized that Damon and Carlton did one of their own that ABC, it seemed like ABC publicity kind of hooked up for them. They just kind of showed up with all the equipment, and these guys just sat down. But they didn't really answer anything. They're like, oh, yeah, we got a question about this. Yeah, we're not going to answer that, So, but there were fan podcasts that, talked, had all these theories. And I realized that, man, I love the show, but I have this went totally over my head, or that part went, So I love these things. And then I realized that Damon and Carlton did one, and then I think Mark Cherry was doing one for Desperate Housewives, and I knew that Shonda Rhimes and Betsy Beers, I think her name is, they were doing one for Grey's Anatomy, and I'm like, well, how come, and nobody was doing one. There was nobody doing one for Breaking Bad. And, because there were fan podcasts, but we were a very small show. We only had 7 episodes total, right? It was a very, very small season. We were on forgive me AMC, but an obscure network at that point. Nobody knew. But I started looking around and I realized that there was these guys in Alabama that had a Breaking Bad podcast, right? They were just these guys that were sitting around and they were just talking about the show. I was like, okay, so there is one, cool. And I started listening. It was really funny to listen to them and listen to their theories and stuff like that. So when we went back for season 2, I said to Vince, hey, we should do a podcast. And he's like, what's the what is that? And I said, no, it's just talk radio. It's like talk radio. We sit around and talk about the show. He's like, nobody's gonna, what are we gonna talk about? And I'm like, no, I'm serious. We could do one. It'd just be me and you. We could, we just talk about it. We just go in and say, hey, Vince, where'd you get that idea? How did this go about? What was the casting like? Stuff like that. And so he's like, and he put it off, right? And so, I think we started that season in probably August, and maybe sometime around February, we were editing, and he was in my room editing one of my shows, and I remember we were eating lunch, and we were kind of on schedule. We weren't behind. So I said to him, hey, I'm gonna set up mics in my room. Let's just talk about the show. 15 minutes. We'll just talk about episode 1. We'll just talk about it. No big deal. He's like, well, I can't talk. Are you gonna ask me questions or something? Because I'm like, oh, no problem. And it was once he started talking, just like me, he doesn't stop talking, right? And it was great. And so once we finished it, the first one, he's like, hey, this is way cool. Hey, we should do them for all of them. We get the writers in. We get the actors in. We just do them. And then they became a thing. And they got really, really big really quickly. We got everybody. We got, Aaron Paul for a couple of them. We got Bryan Cranston. We got Bob Odenkirk, I think, that year. We got everybody. I think the only people we didn't get were I think we didn't get Anna Gunn, right? But I think we got just about everybody, all these other people. And we got all the writers. I mean, everybody was stoked about doing these. They liked them. It was fun. And they got longer and longer. And what happened was we just, we have to edit them, and then we have to go through a notes process. It's not like, people out there think that we just record these things and throw them up there. No, that is not the case, right? So we do them, and we put them on the air. I mean, that was the other thing. I was like, look, I'll be happy to edit. I'll be happy to put it into a form where we can just send it to somebody. But I don't want to sit here and monitor iTunes and RSS feeds and all this kind of stuff. We got to find somebody that can handle this, right? Because all the other ones, like ABC, they were having they had a crew doing them. They just had to show up, right? So we were doing all of this work, And Melissa Bernstein, I think, was very instrumental in getting AMC to say, okay, they didn't really know what we were doing. We just had podcasts, and they thought, well, we can like do 5 minutes. And Vince was like, we're not gonna do 5 minutes. This thing is like 40 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour, you know. And they basically thought that nobody would sit around to do. This was early, right? They thought nobody would sit around to listen to these things. And then Sony helped us out by getting it up on iTunes. And once we started sending it to him, I don't really remember asking about like how it was doing until maybe like the 5th or the 6th one. But like people like loved it, and we were getting all kinds of traffic. We started to get hacked. They were at one point, I think, that people figured out that they could like put in a different URL and get like at one point one got spoiled. Like luckily not that many people. And I was like sort of like going on IMDb, which is, you know, I would go on their forum site and like sit here and monitor and see if anybody's listening to it. And one person said, oh yeah, I got the I can't remember what number it was, but you know, one of the podcasts early, and I was like freaked. I'm like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And then I was challenging this person. I'm like, there's no way how, you know, and they told me how they did it. And so I did it, and I'm like, okay, and I'm immediately on the phone with AMC, and I'm like, you know, we gotta take this down, da da da. And so after that, it was one of these things where we do not deliver to anybody until after the show airs and stuff, because it would just be crazy, you know, but people loved them.